Hi, I'm Robert and this is the Manhattan Wood Project. I have an awesome new tool coming in, and I need to build a cart for it. A cart kind of like that one. So stay tuned, let's design and build this cart.
So what should I make today? Manhattan Wood Project. That looks great!
I have a new tool coming in and need to build a permanent home for it. I don't have a lot of money to spare, but I need a good rolling cabinet that's sturdy and stable. I designed this rolling table to be built primarily out of 2x4s and 3/4 inch MDF with a 3/4 inch melamine top and table trim made out of a different color of wood. Since I expect there to be a lot of weight and want maximum stability, I'm going to add 5 5-inch locking swivel casters, 4 in the corners and 1 in the middle. I need the tabletop to be extremely sturdy, but I don't want to devote 3 or 4 inches of thickness to a torsion box. The equipment going on top of it will potentially vibrate a lot, so a lot of weight would be good. I wanted the exposed tabletop to be melamine, since you can write on it with a pencil and clean the marks off with alcohol. Unfortunately, the only sheets I could find were 2 foot by 4 foot, so I decided to glue 2 of them down to a piece of 3/4 inch MDF. The melamine was on both sides of the sheets. If you've ever tried to glue melamine to something, you know that glue doesn't stick to it very well. That gave me an opportunity to play around a bit with the router and take off just a little bit of the melamine to expose the MDF beneath. After demolishing the bottom side of these boards, I applied all the glue that I had left in my shop and put the MDF bottom on. Then I drilled pilot holes with countersinks and added deck screws to aid with clamping and stabilization. The next step was to prepare the wood for the frames. I chose a dozen 2x4s and planed and cut them down to 1.25 inches by 3 inches. That eliminated a lot of the mill marks and damage the 2x4s had previously received and left me a lot of really nice looking pine lumber. Since I didn't have room in the shop to manipulate large sheets of wood on the table saw, I used my little circular saw to cut the top and all of the MDF to size. I added pieces of paint tape onto the melamine to keep from dragging the metal base of the saw on it and scratching up the top. With all the MDF sheets cut to size, I cut the pine lumber to the proper length and glued and screwed the frame pieces to the bottom side of the table. Once again, I drilled pilot holes with countersinks and used deck screws to secure them. After the glue on the tabletop frame had dried, I started gluing the rest of the framework to the sides and the bottom. I added a center wall to the cart to distribute weight along the center and had to cut notches in the corners for the frame pieces to fit. It worked great as a third hand to hold the sides upright while the glue on the frame pieces dried. With all the walls, top, and bottom frames out, it was time to start assembly. Before I started putting everything together, I added 5 swiveling, locking 5-inch casters. 1 in each corner and 1 in the middle for supporting the weight of the table and everything it was going to hold. I could have used a regular 5-inch caster in the middle, but it was easiest just to buy 5 of the same caster since I got them on Amazon. Each caster can support 300 pounds, and I estimate the cart's going to weigh a good 200 pounds, so I should be good as long as I don't put more than 1,300 more pounds of additional weight on the cart. I'm really happy with how smoothly the casters swivel and how well they grip the concrete floor. With the casters on, it's time to build the cart. I started by gluing and screwing the center divider into place, followed by the right side, then the left side. After attaching the top, I made some nice MDF face frames to go on the front and back, then glued and screwed them on. I had planned on the inside of the MDF face sticking out up to 1/4 inch past the pine framework, and I wanted to level it, so I put a flush trim bit in my router and routed the face flush to the framework. It worked perfectly. Well, not so much. The table overlapped and I couldn't get the router to trim along the top. So I made a little jig for the router base to ride on that would let me use the flush trim bit. Let me explain how it works. When I explain it that way, it makes perfect sense. Anyways, the jig worked extremely well. After the routing was done, I had just a little bit of waste left. Working very carefully to keep from scratching up the framework, I used a handsaw to remove the residual MDF in the corners. With the base model of the cart complete, it's now time to decorate. I painted the MDF sides and face frame with 2 coats of the same brownish grayish color that I used on my tool chest, 2 sets of shelves, and scrap cart. What can I say? Apparently I have a color theme. I had one more important component left, the trim to go around the tabletop. I had cut and planed 2 redwood 2x4s to 1 inch by 2.5 inches and then cut them roughly in half. Then I used my table saw to cut a groove 1/2 inch deep and slightly wider than the tabletop. This required a large number of passes on the table saw since I would have to cut a board, flip it around, cut it again, then move the fence over about 1 blade width and repeat. Eventually, I got the groove cut to the right width. Since I was guesstimating at how far to move the fence, I ended up with a lot of little scrap strips left in the grooves. So I just finished cutting a notch into these pieces of redwood to go around my table. And you can see there's some places where I have a little bit left. Well, that's where my fathead flathead, my all-purpose tool, comes in. I've used this thing for everything, prying, scraping. It's got such a round tip, wouldn't even work with a screwdriver. But it'll work darn well with something like this. I can just stick it in and ride it along like this. I can pull pieces out, and what little is at the bottom can be cleaned out with a chisel or this, or just left, because I'm not counting on 1,000th accuracy or anything like that. So simple way to remove all this extra scrap. After removing the scrap strips, I used a wide chisel to smooth it down. I didn't expect it to be perfectly flat, but I didn't want large chunks sticking out in the groove that would prevent glue from holding the trim onto the tabletop. The next step was to put some nice roundovers on the trim using my router. That went really quick, and it was the first thing I'd done with the redwood that didn't take more than a few minutes. I cut 45-degree miters on the trim using my table saw, then applied the trim using a lot of glue, and some 1.5-inch brads. I put about 5-1.5-inch brads along each section, and then 2 each direction in the corners. After the glue had dried, I sanded the miters and then closed them up using a trick that one of my fellow woodworkers had showed me at some point in the past. I don't remember who it was, but whoever used this trick in one of their videos, thank you very much. The final step with the trim was to put on a couple coats of Danish oil. I really like how the red sticks out against the grayish-brownish paint and the white tabletop. I may still put a coat of polyurethane on it to give it a little shine, but that's something I can do later on. One of the best things about a cart like this is that it can be configured to work with almost any tool you want to put up here. Get rid of the little raised edge here. You can put a router upside down in the middle. You have a nice router table. You can put a contractor's table saw, a chop saw, a grinder, you name it. If it's a tabletop tool, it'll fit on here. And you can do a number of modifications on this. I plan to do a lot of modifications over the next month or so. One of them is some shelves. So I'm going to put some shelves all the way down. I'm going to kind of compartmentalize. I'm going to make some additions on the side. But you can do all those things just with basically any woodworker tool. You don't have to have any specialty tools. Now I built this cart specifically to hold my latest tool, the X-Carve, which was sent to me by Inventables. Thank you so much to all of you at Inventables for taking a chance, sending this to me, giving me a chance to try it out, use it. I'm sure that I'm going to be having a whole lot of fun with it. So I'm going to modify this to make it work, especially for CNC machines. I'm going to have more videos coming out in the next few weeks. Not all of them are going to be CNC videos. I still plan on doing a lot of hand and other power tool woodworking. But don't forget to like, share, subscribe so that you're one of the first ones to know that there's a new video out. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Inventables, and I will see you on the next project. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you really liked it, or if you like my channel, please consider subscribing. You can hit the big subscribe channel below, or hit my little logo up here. Also, please consider subscribing to my upcycling channel, Round Trip Upcycling. You can just click on the logo right up here.